Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Reap the Spoils. My name is Mark Sullivan.
I'm Delaila Lugo.
I am Jason Kwasnicki.
And today, we're going to be talking about a special video game. I don't remember who introduced the last one. I'm introducing it. Fuck it. We're talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake. And a little bit of Final Fantasy VII, like original. We'll get into that. But basically, what this show is, in case this is the first time you're tuning in, to capitalize on the Final Fantasy hype going on right now, this is a gaming spoiler cast where we take a game, we all play it, and then we jump in here and we talk about it. But we don't just talk about the story. We talk about the mechanics, talk a little bit about the history. We talk about what we liked, what we didn't like, what we wanted to see, what we want to see next, so on and so forth. We're really, really just going to dive into this video game.
Yeah.
Jason, you look like you have something to say.
I don't have anything to say. I'm just waiting for you. You're on a roll.
I'm on a roll.
Go with it, man.
Jason's here. He's got his Final Fantasy IX t-shirt on.
Fuck it, we're doing this live. Yeah. I'm a niner.
So, that being said, I want to give just a quick warning. If you haven't played Final Fantasy VII Remake, I do not suggest you listen on. I suggest you go get the game, play it, and then come back and listen. That and also goes...
I would suggest on top of that, play the original Final Fantasy VII first.
That's what I was about to say. I would also agree with that. You can get away with just the first part of Final Fantasy VII, but A, you should really play through that entire game. It's really good. And B, there's some stuff in this game that kind of hints towards things to come later. I'll leave it at that to give you enough time to go ahead and turn off the episode and go play both games.
But really, to be clear, we're only spoiling the Midgar section of the old Final Fantasy. Well, right? We're not.
You know what?
Possible.
Yeah, Jason said earlier or the other day in our own chat, that's going to be really hard to do. The more I think about it, the harder it is going to be to do. So just to be safe, if you haven't played the original, it's probably best to not listen quite yet, or even play the remake. Personally, so yeah, come back when you do it. They're both great games. You should go play them. Completely go play them. Okay. Now that we have our little disclaimer out of the way, do we want to get started with a little history lesson?
Yes.
Jason, you ready to do some learning?
I'm not learning anything. Actually, I have some things to add to this.
Oh my god. Well, we can't take the whole episode.
This is a neophyte history.
We can't spend the whole episode talking
Just
about
go.
Okay. So, the original Final Fantasy VII, released in 1997 for the PlayStation 1 console, the original PlayStation. It was wildly successful, both commercially and critically. It's one of the most beloved JRPGs, one of the most beloved video games on the PlayStation 1's library. 2 years later, we got Final Fantasy VIII. A year later, we got Final Fantasy IX. And in the early 2000s, Square had announced plans to remake all three of those games, 7, 8, and 9, for the PlayStation 2, which was ultimately just kind of canceled. They pretty much realized that would be a massive undertaking to remake all three of those games with the PlayStation 2's capabilities to make it to the scale that they'd want. It would be too much. So those remakes ultimately got canceled, never to be heard from until way later. So at E3 2005, we got a tech demo of Square Enix's Crystal Tools engine, which showed the beginning cutscene of Final Fantasy VII on basically PS3 hardware and full 3D HD, which kind of led to a lot of speculation, a lot of heads turning, a lot of people begging, saying, does this mean a remake is coming? Are you finally remaking it? Are you going to do it? Are you going to do it? Are you going to do it? To which Square denied. They said there are no plans. This was just a This was just a technical demo to show the technical capabilities of the PlayStation 3 system, which was true. There were no plans at that time for a remake. Years and years and years pass, and the idea got floated back out by Shinji Hashimoto. He floated out the idea to Kitase to remake Final Fantasy VII, to which Kitase didn't really want to do, but the more Kitase, Nojima, and Nomura discussed it, they felt that they were getting too old, and the older they get, the less of a chance they'll have to remake this game and have to pass it on to the next generation. So they ultimately decided to take up the opportunity before they pass on to remake the game. That happened sometime prior to E3 2015. During E3 2015, the project was announced during Sony's infamous E3 presentation. I'm sure y'all remember that.
God, I can't believe how long ago. 5 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
It does not feel like that long ago.
And the other reasons that E3 presentation was so infamous was because not only did they announce Final Fantasy VII Remake, The Last Guardian got revived and re-revealed during that E3 presentation, which was a game long dormant in development. And the Kickstarter for Shenmue 3 was also announced.
The big, that was the big star of the show because everybody wants Shenmue 3.
Well, all three of those were the big stars of the show. That was all three of those was why people talked about that press conference so much.
Parentheses, sarcasm.
So it was revealed at E3 2015. The game entered full production in late 2015, being worked on by the developer CyberConnect 2. They're really well known for the Dot Hack series. They've made a lot of, I believe, Naruto games. Lots of more anime-style hack-and-slash games. Ultimately, development for this game got moved in-house in 2017, a lot of which no one knows to the extent of which got scrapped, but a lot of the progress got scrapped and kind of restarted once it got moved in-house. Shortly after that, we got another trailer, and some press releases and news came out about the game going multi-part, which raised a lot of concerns amongst the gaming community. And I think a lot of that's pretty... Well, we'll get into it. We'll get into our thoughts on that.
I have thoughts on that.
Yeah, but a lot of people were really skeptical and didn't really know what that meant, if it was going to be episodic, if it was going to... How long we were going to have to wait between games parts. But ultimately, we got the first part. Not on March 3rd, like it was originally revealed to be released on. We got it on April 10th. Some people even got it a week, maybe 2 weeks earlier. If you lived in Australia, some parts of Europe, because of the whole COVID-19 situation happening still currently at that time of this recording. A lot of people were able to get the game early. I got my copy 1 day early, so lucky me.
Same.
You fuckers.
But yeah, that's my brief history lesson. There's so much more to talk about, but I don't want to take up too much time talking about this.
Yeah, Jason, you had something to add, but I know Mark said not to add too much. Did you want to put in like a sentence or two about the history?
Did you have anything to add?
Just the only I was kind of being facetious in a way, but there was one thing I think that is important when talking about the relationship between the original game and the remake. Just going to the history of the original game, and it's kind of a side thing, but I think it is really important for why the story became the way it was and why it resonated so well. And just to give a brief synopsis in terms of how the story came to be in the original. The three writers of the remake, Katase, Nojima, and Nomura, were scenario writers on the original. But in the original, Sakaguchi was also a scenario writer, but it was all based on an original story written by Sakaguchi, and the four scenario writers just kind of fleshed it out. And a lot of the inspiration for that story came from the fact that the sudden loss of Sakaguchi's mother during the development of Final Fantasy VI, which ties in heavily. Obviously, if you're listening to this, we presume you know the events of both the original and this game. The theme of death and dealing with loss. So that paired with the fact that Sakaguchi was not involved with this remake, I think is something to note, especially when we get into later changes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Sakaguchi has long been separated from Square Enix. So, but okay.
It's just something I wanted to throw in there.
No, that's fine.
As a premise to maybe some thoughts I had. Honestly, I think if Sakaguchi was there, the remake might have not been done at all. But a lot of things in the history of Square Enix would have been different if Sakaguchi was still there.
All right, shall we dive into the game now?
Yeah.
Let's go.
Do we wanna start with the fucking ending? Do we want to build up to it?
Let's just go.
All right, let's talk about that fucking ending. What the fuck was that?
This is why I don't play Kingdom Hearts, man. It's why I don't play
Oh my god.
You know, I was really nervous. I was really nervous as I got closer and closer to the end of the game, because for the most part, for the majority of the game, it's a very, very loyal remake, and it has some embellishments throughout. There's some sections that are bloated up. There's some motivations that are changed, altered to better fit the story, and make it a little more cinematic, I guess.
The core plot points are there. I guess what you're getting at, the core plot points are there. Whether or not you think the execution was done well, you could argue.
Not even execution done well, just like the execution might have been a little different, but core plot points were there. Yeah. And it was overall a very loyal remake until the very end, when it just goes real weird. And I had been seeing, people on Twitter and people on Reddit talking about it and being like, wow, they really, Nomura, you really pulled a Kingdom Hearts there.
People wonder why I shit on him all the time. This is why.
Well, the funny thing is, he's the director, the lead scenario writer, and really the only person credited for that for this game is Nojima.
Nojima's always been his bitch, though.
It's really not Nomura. Oh, stop it. So let's just talk. Let's just get into it. So throughout the game, you're being stalked by these ghosts, these specters.
Dementor looking.
Yeah, Dementor ass looking motherfuckers. And we saw them in some trailers leading up. I personally just thought that they were like some ghost enemies that got loose from Train Graveyard, and they added that into the plot for like funsies or something. I just thought it was something cheeky like that.
I thought it was going to play into the Cult of Sephiroth, because if you play the original game,
no,
you know that
too. Well, it's not even the cult. Yeah. It's not even a cult. So those are
they're clones. They're clones of
them. They're people that are infused with Genova cells, and Sephiroth has such a hold over Genova that they're pretty much clones of Sephiroth.
Right.
Cloud being one of them.
So technically speaking, in the original game, you didn't actually face Sephiroth until the very end.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it's honestly, it's still questionable whether or not that was him at the end of this game. I don't know for a fact that was him. It could have been. It very well could have been.
It's a problem.
But that's the thing. There's so many things we don't know. A lot of what we're going to talk about this ending is pure speculation, because there's a lot we don't know, and a lot we probably won't know for like 3 years now. So those spectral things are arbiters of fate. And the reason, and the more you think about it, like anytime they pop up in the game, like the very first time you see them is when you meet Aerith in the street, and the reason that they were harassing her was to make sure she stayed there and met Cloud, because what they're ultimately doing is ensuring that the events of the original game occur, because that is these people's destiny, and they are making sure that things go as they are ordained to happen.
Which is why they save her in multiple points of the game.
Yes, they save her at multiple points in the game. Towards the end, when Sephiroth shows up and stabs Barrett, which holy shit!
I fucking
I wanted
cried.
that. I wanted them to actually kill off Barrett. I thought that would have been such an awesome ending.
Man, that's fucked up.
Well, think
I
about
mean,
it. Think about it
Yeah,
this way.
that would have
From
really
the,
that really would have rocked the boat. That really would have changed things up.
that
yeah.
would have been, and it would have actually served a story purpose in the sense that it would have given the party even more motivation to go after Sephiroth in part 2.
But I think that, but I think Barrett's too integral of a character to kill off, and
Not. I mean, like after you
I
leave
think at
Midgar,
I
really the
think
only section in the original
at
is when you learn his backstory.
at this point in the game, he's too integral of a character to kill off.
But that's why you wait till the end.
No, at this point I'm sorry. At this point of the entire scenario, just about to leave Midgar, it's too early to kill him off if you're going to change that up that much. And that was still a really surprising story moment.
But but I'm asking, what outside of the town that you visit where he's from, where you learn about how
Corel.
he actually came to adopt Marlene,
Corel.
which you don't, yeah, you don't really need to know that. It's not that super important because they
But that's
do mix it.
denying. But that's denying more depth to this character by just getting rid of that. I mean,
I think they added sufficient depth to him
well, I don't disagree with
in
that.
in Midgar itself to justify killing him at the end, and it could have been a touching moment where, because ultimately his arc in the original is he comes to realize that, you know, caring for Marlene is more important than, you know, being all gun ho and trying to be a badass saving the planet. Um, which like he could come to realize, oh, like I through his actions he's died now here and now he's leaving Marlene, and you could also have a touching moment because throughout the game he's so cold to Cloud, and you could have him say something like, yeah, you know, oh, Merc, you're okay, or something like that, because
Well,
we also see Cloud. I'm just
they
throwing
did
things
have
out there. Like,
moments like that by the end.
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just saying it would have been even more touching if it was like his dying words. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know.
And it would have. That's just.
I know it's
I see
I'm
what you're
just throwing
saying.
it
It
out
could have
there.
made it a little more spicy, but
Yes, exactly.
spicy.
but I want more Barrett. He's my favorite character, and when that happened, I cried so much. But then when he came back alive, I was
But that's
so hyped.
that's the thing. When he came back, I was pissed because I'm like, the fuck.
You made me cry for nothing.
You're
Why?
just
No,
like,
I'm
take
like,
a fucking
what?
risk, Square.
Playing with my
I'm
emotions.
like, what the fuck was the point of that? Like,
Yeah.
Well, the point of it was to show. So the point of it was to show a couple things. It was to show that Sephiroth doesn't abide by this, by these arbiters of fate. He does whatever the fuck he wants, and they have no control over him. And B, it was to show just how far they're willing to go to make sure things go as they're supposed to. He wasn't supposed to die there. That's not what happened originally. So they revived him.
no,
And
I know.
so there are some important factors to why that happened.
Again, when I say I wish that Barrett had been killed, I'm thinking of a version of the game where there are no ghosts and there's no
Right,
arbiters
and
of
that's kind of
fate.
what I want to get
Yeah.
into is just like I feel just like this whole ending. Let's talk a little bit more about the full picture before we go into some of our thoughts on it. So
Right.
yeah, so these arbiters of fate, they're trying to make sure everything goes as it's planned. Sephiroth is like, fuck that. I want to find a scenario where I win. you start seeing flashes of the future. You see the barren planet with Red 13 running across it with his cubs. You see all of this footage, by the way, is from Advent Children. You see Aerith dying at the Forgotten City, and the holy materia falling from her hair. You see the clip of Cloud jumping up at Sephiroth, swords ready. All of that is footage from Advent Children, which I thought was
Not
really...
not Red 13. That's the ending of
No,
the original.
that was also in Advent Children, and that was that
Was it?
that version of the very beginning of the movie. Yes,
Huh.
the very first scene of the movie is that scene done in HD for Advent Children.
To
And
be
that's
fair,
what they
I've
showed.
only watched Advent Children once. Like, and
I've
yeah.
watched Advent Children way too
I
many
did
times.
too a long time ago.
Yeah, I've seen that movie way too many times. More times than I'm willing to admit. I own it way more than I'm willing to admit too. I own several copies of that
I still
movie.
have it on Blu-ray. It's sitting there. I just never watched it again.
So they start seeing these flashes, and they ultimately Aerith opened this portal for them to go in, and it took them somewhere. And this is a big part of what we don't know and what's kind of up for debate, because was that a singularity? Was that a different timeline? Was that a parallel? What
it's
is
the
that?
edge of creation.
Well, that's where Cloud and Sephiroth wound up, but like, what does any of that mean? And the big thing to also take away from this is, during that, we see intermittent clips of Zack outside the city limits facing down against the Shinra troops, which happens 5 years before the events of Final Fantasy VII. And this is where it all kind of comes together, as like, what the fuck did I just see? So, and why this is so much up for debate, because we see Zack survive the onslaught, and he picks up Cloud and starts carrying him towards Midgar, and we see that empty bag float by with a different version of Stamp, the Shinra mascot dog. It's Stamp, but it's a different breed of Stamp. And
yeah,
that begs the question of, is he used as a Shinra mascot? Is he like, why is this different? So like that begs the question, like, is this an alternate timeline? Is this a singularity? Is this a parallel universe? Like, what is this? And they wind up taking down the Arbiters of Fate. They take control of their destiny, and they wind up doing the same thing they do in the original. They leave Midgar. And Aerith, throughout the whole game, seems to know a lot more than she kind of lets on to the rest of the party. She kind of gives hints at it. She seems to know things that she shouldn't know. I think she knew Marlene's name before anyone told her.
Yeah.
And there's a question.
There's a lot of Easter eggs if you go back and think about it.
And question for you guys. In Chapter 14, which resolution did you get?
I got Aerith.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got
Yeah, so I since I've played through it twice so far, I got Tifa and I got Barrett's.
How do you get it? I thought it was who you picked up first after you fought.
There's also
there's
some other dialogue choices earlier in the game that kind of alter what resolution you get. It's also dependent on side quests that you do and stuff.
That makes sense.
It's
because I was always trying to get up on Tifa, so that's probably why.
God. So, Delaila,
speaking of which, I just want to mention one thing. There was all that drama leading up to this game regarding Tifa's assets, we'll say. But then you go to Scarlet, the weapons designer for Shinra.
Yeah.
And she's basically got like the most massive rack I've ever seen in a video game. And not only that, she's wearing dresses that barely cover them. So,
yeah, like, but also, if we want to talk about this, all the drama about Tifa, and she looks fucking great.
Yeah,
like,
her boobs are super huge. I'm just saying that.
Yeah.
They're huge.
I say
And she's wearing a sports bra.
I say this as a man, but like men don't understand women's anatomy, and they need to just shut the fuck up.
In fact, hers are probably bigger than that weapons expert. As a woman, I can tell you that.
Yeah. So Delaila, I correct me if I'm wrong, but during Aerith's scene, doesn't she say something about not falling in love with her?
Yes, she
Yeah.
tells Cloud not to fall in love with her.
Yeah. So like, that's a hint. I haven't seen the scene yet, so I don't know the context. I still have to go back and replay that episode a third time. But yeah, that's kind of the gist with Aerith. She seems to know more than she lets on. And I think a lot of that, here's where we're going to go into cuckoo crazy town territory. But
Before we get into that,
Go
could
ahead.
you guys just tell me how it was with Tifa and Barrett? Because I didn't see those scenarios.
So Tifa,
Tifa was super emotional.
yeah, Tifa, I think from what I've read about the other two, I haven't seen them, but I think Tifa's was definitely the best. Basically, she breaks down under the pressure, and she starts crying, and she just runs to Cloud and leans up and rests her head on him. And Cloud at first is kind of like, what the fuck's going on? And eventually he does start hugging her to the point where she eventually stops and is like, Cloud, you're hurting me. And it's a great character moment for both of them, I feel like.
Yeah.
Kind of like it shows Cloud opening up a bit. And, that's where this game hits its high points. Like, its highest points are definitely the character moments.
Mm-hmm.
It feels a lot like, I'm wearing a Final Fantasy IX shirt. One of the reasons I love Final Fantasy IX so much is because more than any other Final Fantasy, it has a lot of those really great character moments, and that's where this game really shines. And it was like Mark said, a really emotional moment.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What about Barrett?
Barrett's was just pretty much. Honestly, I can't even remember much about it. It really wasn't that big. It was kind of them coming more to terms with what they have to do and kind of just warming up to each other a little more. Like Barrett has definitely come around on Cloud, and Cloud has come much more around on Barrett. It was a good character moment for them. It's not nearly as memorable as the Tifa scene or likely the Aerith scene.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be interesting to see if these choices in part one and the scenes you get have ramifications going forward.
I doubt it.
I mean, yeah, it's not exactly like a Mass Effect, but
So like, just to give some post game information, you unlock a data log after you beat the game, and one of the things on there is to unlock all three of those scenes in chapter 14.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I want to go back and get the other one. Just mostly, a lot of it's for completionist sake, and a lot of it's also because I want to see it.
But anyway, back to so Aerith knows more.
Yeah, and
than she lets on.
Yeah, that's another. And at the end, she seems to be a little somber. She seems to sense that in somewhere, some way, Zack is alive, and that there's just a lot going on with her that's suspicious. And
yeah, she mentions him by name, which did not happen in the original. I don't remember it happening in the original, at least.
Did she mention Zack by name?
Well, when
she
they're
says
in the
her
park,
old boyfriend. You remind me of like my old boyfriend Zack or something like that.
They do that is said in the original. It's just, she doesn't name drop him, but I don't think she name dropped him this time either.
You couldn't hear it, but you saw her lips moving to say his name. Then Cloud had like one of those flashbacks.
Oh, we had an episode. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of episodes, so it's hard to kind of keep track of each one.
Exactly.
All right. I want to enter Crazy Cuckoo Land territory real quick and try to make sense of this fucking ending. And
there is none.
End of story. End of episode. Thanks for listening, guys.
I've tried, and I'll once you give your
here's
go
the
on
thing.
what
Is
you were
like
gonna say.
so with all the I've been reading a lot about this, and it kind of makes sense to an extent. And this is a Sephiroth that wants to win. This is a Sephiroth he knows what happens, and the only way I can see he knows what happens, and kind of how Aerith also might know what happens. So Sephiroth and Aerith are both part of the life stream by the end of
Right.
the original, right? And also by the end of Advent Children. They know everything that happens. So what if somehow through the life stream they somehow get connected to either a singularity or an alternate universe or alternate timeline or whatever, and manage to either take control of their selves in that timeline, or at least communicate with themselves in that timeline, and the two of them are aware because the two of them are part of the life stream in that alternate timeline or in the original timeline, right? So these are two this is Aerith and Sephiroth post Advent Children going back to try and either warn the others or stop the others and win.
So that, yeah, obviously that's the big theory going around. There's to take it even further. Sephiroth has a black wing. His one wing is black in his depiction here, which only happens in Advent Children. So the theory is he is the one that Cloud kills in Advent Children, and obviously at the end of Advent Children he says, after Cloud defeats him,
I will never
it's
be
like
a
last
memory.
words. Yeah, I'll never be a memory. So that one is coming back. So let's just start going off of that at what you actually do at the end of the game. You kill the Harbinger of Fate,
Yes.
and everybody's like, all right, we are no longer chained to destiny. Things won't be the same. That makes sense, I guess, for Sephiroth. Obviously, for the reasons you just stated, because he knows he's going to lose, so he wants to change it. All right, so that I can see why that would make sense. The problem I have is if Aerith knows what's going to happen, and if the planet is telling her, you need to do this XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
Why would she want to kill the Harbingers of Fate if they're a defense mechanism of the planet
I guess
to save the planet?
because Sephiroth's already no longer controlled or conforming to them. So even though they can be controlled by fate, he can't. So he can still do whatever the hell he wants, and they can't. So them freeing themselves gives them a fighting chance.
But
That's
even
the way
still,
I see it.
I've heard that argument too. But even then, if the Harbinger of Fate is a mechanism of the planet, similar to the way in the original game the planet had weapons that came forth to
Right.
defend itself, why is the Harbinger of Fate fighting you? If Aerith is an agent of the planet, essentially, to try to correct for this new Sephiroth.
I wouldn't say she's an agent of the planet, but I see your point, and I don't really have a rebuttal because
Exactly.
it doesn't all really make much sense.
I think the reality, and a lot of people, their first impression of this, and I think it's a reason a lot of people are angry, and I think this was really more the purpose of all this bullshit, is that it's supposed to be a meta commentary on the Harbingers of Fate being a meta representation of the fandom not wanting shit to change. Like, really, I think all this other crap about destiny and changing things, you can't make it make sense. I think that the writers just really wanted to have that in there as a meta commentary.
Here's the problem I have with that is that's going to make things severely fall apart with any future installments.
Exactly.
Like, you could do that, you could make that commentary, and sure, you could debate on whether or not it's effective, but if that was your goal for doing that, you just screwed your plans for anything in the future.
Well, you already screwed it in other ways.
Because where do you go from here?
Well, yeah, I mean, you fought Sephiroth at the end of the first.
Here's the thing, and here's where I want to go right from that point, okay? Because if we eliminate all the bits of fate, like if we eliminate the whole thing happening with Aerith, or like early in the game, if we eliminate the whole thing that happened in the Sector 7 slums, where Cloud was going to go his separate ways, and the Fates were like, oh, we can't let that happen, so they fuck up Jesse's leg, and it's like, oh, I guess Cloud has to go now. If you had just gotten rid of that and actually kept this thing more loyal, you could have eliminated all the Fate shit. You could have had it be a fairly loyal remake with some embellishments here and there, which I had no problem with, and then still end it with the Sephiroth boss fight at the end of the highway, because why the fuck not? You need to have a big bombastic ending to the game, and you just have
Not Sephiroth though.
sure.
You can't have Sephiroth. No,
No. It's still
like,
still have it as either a clone that looks like him or as a de novo part that looks like him, because that happened in the original game too. You just change that to have that happen because you need a big epic boss fight. You need something huge to happen at the end of the game, and who better than Sephiroth?
I think,
but you can find a better way to do it than have these fucking ghosts flying around. Oh, we got to control fate. Oh, we need to break free and take control of our destiny. Like,
I think the
get
best
rid of
suggestion. I think the best suggestion, I didn't come up with this. This is something I heard on YouTube. The best suggestion I heard would have been you extend the game, so that it actually ends with you getting to
Calm.
Yeah, to Calm.
Calm.
And then the game ends with Cloud having the Nibelheim flashback, and you fight Sephiroth in the flashback.
On the inverse I have of that is I think that whatever the next installment is should open with the flashback and have that as a tutorial segment, because that's when Cloud is at his youngest and at his weakest, and that would be a good way to reintroduce people to the combat and the way the game plays without without making it awkward, like actually in present time post, you getting to the end of this first game being like level 50 with maxed out weapons and shit. No, you have rookie Cloud in this flashback, and that reintroduces you to how the game works. That's my take on that.
So I guess my take ultimately with Sephiroth, and I feel like Sephiroth is one of the biggest victims of this game. In the original game, he is barely in this segment. You really don't learn that much about him until you hear him in passing, and he doesn't care who you are. He doesn't really know who you are. Like in the original game I'm talking about, you really only see him through I think you have the original flashback where you're fighting alongside him in Midgar. Am I correct? At one point?
Yeah, and even that's an embellished memory from Cloud.
Right. You have that, and then you have the really memorable scene when you leave the prison cells and the Shinra building is just fucked up by him, and then you see the katana through President Shinra. I think they should have taken that approach. I mean, obviously, because of the way they wrote the story, it's I guess supposed to be a different Sephiroth, but it ruins the build-up. And I'm trying to look at this and criticize it from the point of view of somebody who has not played the original game. By the end of the game, I have no fucking idea who Sephiroth is, why he's doing anything that he's doing.
Yeah,
I have no fucking idea why he's showing up over and over again gratuitously from the beginning to the end.
And that's pretty much why I don't think that's kind of why it's hard to talk about this game without spoiling the original, because while they tried to make this game, welcoming to newcomers, this ending isn't welcoming to anyone new to this.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's not even welcoming to a lot of people who know this shit.
Yeah. It really makes me wonder, like, who is this for? Because even a diehard fan like me, who has played the original game like countless times, has seen Advent Children more times than he's willing to admit, is pretty well up on the whole compilation series of everything before and after this game. And even I'm like, why? What is this? Why would you do this? Like, like I said, I don't have an issue with having like embellishments, things added to the plot to make it more cinematic, or even bloat this out, because this
and
game...
I want to get there, because I thought they were going to go in a completely different direction, because some of those embellishments could have made for a better alternate ending and a better final battle. that you didn't need to do Sephiroth really at all in this game.
I don't know.
Aside from maybe like hinting at what's to
Well,
come in final.
let's get into it now. What did you have in mind?
Well, one of my favorite parts about this game is how they embellished. Like, there's a lot of shit they added that just was unnecessary. Like, one of my biggest
Also,
problems.
I want to say real quick, I feel really bad because I feel like Delilah has said no more than 20 words this whole episode
Yeah,
so far.
before, that's fair. Before we move on, Delilah, what is your perspective? Because you are not as like I feel like you're probably not as
No,
invested
I'm not as invested
as
in
me and
Final
Mark.
Fantasy
Delilah,
as
are
a
you eating
series.
popcorn over there?
No.
Are you just watching the show?
Oh yeah. Sorry.
And
No.
by the way, for the people listening, like I don't really care all that much about Final Fantasy VII. It's
I
not even in
do.
my top five. It's not even in my top five Final
It's in
Fantasies.
mine.
But like, even at that, like, it's still kind of not anger. It almost I was somewhat excited for this game, and it just made me feel like indifferent. I don't know.
Delilah.
Delilah, what are your
Is
thoughts
it
on the
just
ending?
the story though that makes you feel indifferent? The way they went.
There's other things. We'll get to it.
Oh, okay. And as someone so I played the original Final Fantasy back in the days. I started replaying it right before this came out. I didn't exceed Midgar because I didn't know that they were gonna bring in Crisis Core to the mix,
Yeah.
or Advent Children. I did see Advent Children when it first came out, but I don't have my head wrapped around all of those nearly as much as you guys. And as someone who is like, I would say, a modest fan of Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy VII, this was extremely confusing, but it's also intriguing because I'm wondering where they're gonna go with this now. And now I'm not just like, okay, the next project that they have for this series is just going to be continuing as the original did. Now they're going a completely different direction that fans, newbies, people like me that are somewhere in the middle have no idea where it's going to go. And that to me is exciting because now I'm looking forward to see where they go with this. And I can see how it makes like real hardcore fans angry and new fans extremely confused. But for me, I'm like, well, like now I'm looking forward to see what the fuck they do with this shit.
And I agree with that for the most part. Like I'm conflicted. I am both very excited to see what they do and very disappointed at what they wound up doing. Not that I needed it to be super loyal, but this to me just isn't it. This doesn't really fit in with the goal the original tried to set out there, and this just seems like it all. I guess the thing is it's all very backloaded. Like throughout the game we have this mystery of who the fuck these specters are, and then it all just gets dropped on you all at once, and you're spending that entire time trying to make sense of it all, and then the game ends as the original did, with you leaving Midgar. So it's like, well, and it doesn't really offer any deep explanation as to what you just witnessed. So and who knows when we're going to get that.
Yeah.
So while I do like having the mystery again, I like not knowing where it's going to go. I'm not sure that in the end with what we got, I'm going to like it.
Yeah, especially that they seem to be going the Kingdom Hearts route, which, Jason, I'm with you. Like, that's the biggest turnoff for me when it comes to Kingdom Hearts is how convoluted it is. Like, I don't want Final Fantasy VII to be convoluted, and it seems like they're going there. So I hope that they tighten it up for this second remake or whatever they call it.
Jesus, I'm the only person that likes Kingdom Hearts here, aren't I?
I like Kingdom Hearts. It just confuses the fuck out of me.
Oh, it is confusing as hell, but yeah, it's
for people who don't play Kingdom Hearts who are listening, there are like 4 characters in that game that have the name Ansem.
That's his favorite thing to say about Kingdom Hearts.
That's not true.
Like
that's not true.
I tried to read about like what was going on in the story because I only ever played the first one, and they're like, "Oh, Ansem did this." I'm like, "Wasn't he the main villain in the first one?" No, this Ansem.
Again,
like,
so I one of my dream episodes of any fucking show that we do is for Jason and I to just sit down. Delilah, you could be there too. I don't care. Is just for us to sit down and have me talk through the Kingdom Hearts plot. from top to bottom, start to finish, answer any questions, just like get it all down so that we put all this stuff aside. It's like my dream. Maybe one day we'll set aside an entire day to do that.
I might play a Kingdom Hearts game if I'm allowed to fight the Mickey Mouse from South Park.
All right, so you're never gonna play a Kingdom Hearts game.
Yeah,
Got it.
exactly.
So, do we have anything else to add about this ending? I mean, there's probably more that we're gonna say, but like, is there anything on
Yeah.
your guys' minds that you want to get out there right now?
I thought that the way they showed these two timelines, if they are different timelines, we don't know for sure yet.
Yeah.
I thought it was really crafty the way they did that at the end, where like Barrett's reaching out to Marlene and Aerith is like walking past Zack and she can like sense him. I thought that scene was done really well, even though it's confusing and possibly ruining everything that the original game ever did.
Yeah. Oh, and there's other layers to it too, like Sector 7 being rebuilt, which it never was. Sector 7 was never rebuilt, and Biggs being alive.
Yeah.
Presumably, maybe Jessie is still alive. We don't know, but if
Yeah,
Biggs
her
could
glove,
survive,
her glove is like sitting on the table.
yeah, like if he plus if it doesn't matter if we see her or not. If Biggs can live, maybe she could have, and it's just like,
Yeah.
but like,
Which I honestly don't want.
I don't. I mean,
It goes back. This is why I brought up the thing with Sakaguchi in the original game, because I don't, Mark, I don't even know if you know this. The original concept was that at the end of the game, everybody in the party except the people who you chose to go into the final fight was supposed to die.
well, the original concept,
basically,
the original concept actually was that the collision of the life stream and Holy with the meteor was supposed to wipe out all of humanity.
Of humanity, yeah, that's why you get that
the planet
shot.
would ultimately decide that humanity had made its mistake, and this was its end. And that's the shot of Red 13 with his cubs running through a barren planet, that was supposed to be like the end. And then Advent Children kind of retconned that and made that so that happens hundreds of years later, and in actuality, everyone survived, and we get the events of Advent Children. Yeah, I do know about that.
But the point, I guess, the more important point is that the death of Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse, it's like it just adds in the original. It just adds to the tragedy and makes it more immediate of the dropping of the plate.
And let's even talk about those scenes in this game. Like they were way more powerful.
Oh yeah. Well, also the characters were way more powerful.
Yeah, the characters were far more likable. They had fantastic characterization. They did a great job of making them people you can care about. And we did. And that made their death scenes like all the more painful.
Yeah.
And then by the end of look, Biggs is still alive. Oh, that's great. Okay. That completely eliminates any feelings I had earlier.
Yeah, again, that goes back to like a Barrett stabbed. Oh, but the ghost comes in and he's alive.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that, but it's all about this. It's all for this whole defying fate and taking control of your destiny theme that they're
which is almost the exact opposite of what the theme was in the original. That's what I think pisses me off.
You know, it's if I had to describe a feeling I have towards this, it's apathy. I'm like, I'm not mad, but I'm not happy.
Yeah.
I just sat there and was like, well,
okay.
That sure is something.
That was
why did they do that?
That was me. I was like, I just played 40 hours to get to this.
And I'm not even pissed about it because like I said, there's a lot of new things, a lot of new changes that I really, really like, and thought that that really fleshed out that moment a lot more, and I don't mind it being there, but like I said, if you just take away all the Arbiters of Fate, take away all the ghosts throughout the entire game, you can still have like fairly faithful, loyal remake that has all the main story beats, but still add and embellish a lot of stuff and keep all
or
that,
even change things.
and still have it does not matter. And like there's even things that were changed that weren't due to the Arbiters of Fate. Like there were new things. Like the whole fourth chapter is entirely new.
I mean, the whole concept of Neo Midgar, like that was just one line in the original game.
Yeah.
Like and it has become the entire goal of the. Well, they're not really the antagonists, as you find out last chapter. Like,
yeah, they move ahead so much more with the whole war on Wutai.
exactly, and
There's
this
so
is
much more about that's present.
and those are my favorite additions to the
Mm-hmm.
game. That's what I was saying before we decided to circle back. Is my favorite additions to this game is how they fleshed out Avalanche, how they fleshed out the politics with Wutai.
Yeah, that's
How they
another
fleshed
thing.
out the goals of Shinra, and that's why in one of our chats I was like, "Oh man, this is like Metal Gear meets Final Fantasy," because I truly thought what they would do is introduce Rufus maybe via cutscene earlier, because we know obviously from the original game, Rufus was always plotting in some way to take over from his father through some sort of affair. He didn't have a good relationship with his father, and he wanted to take over Shinra and go in a different direction. And he had, he works more closely with the Turks. I thought it would have been cooler to have some secret plot going on where Rufus comes in earlier and is trying to take control. And maybe the way you introduce Sephiroth is that it's kind of hinted that maybe Rufus is working with Sephiroth. And then in in the later chapters, Sephiroth ends up, or the clone of Sephiroth ends up doing what Rufus wanted. He kills President Shinra, but he also betrays Rufus by taking the Genova, the original. What is it? The mother. What do they call it?
No, Genova.
Is it just Genova? I don't
Yeah.
remember. Sephiroth refers to his mother. I thought there was a special name for
because
the original one.
Sephiroth believes that it's his mother, but it's
Mother,
Genova. Yeah, that's another thing that I really liked. Oh, shoot, what did you say? You said something that I really, really enjoyed.
Avalanche being
Avalanche, that's the one.
expanded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. God, you said so much that I forgot where I was going to go. Avalanche
And
originally was just this small operation. Now there's like a whole HQ that we never see that helps out.
Yeah, they don't
Barrett
play with
to.
it. Like, there's so much other gratuitous, in my opinion, gratuitous padding in this game that they could have easily substituted with that shit.
Yeah, like it could have been cool to go and see, and we know about Avalanche being a larger operation thanks to Before Crisis, which is a game we've never seen here in the West. But Avalanche is bigger than just Barrett, Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse.
But instead, we get like a fucking entire dungeon / chapter dedicated to Leslie from a fan fiction. Like, not to be diminutive, but who the fuck cares about Leslie?
I thought Leslie's little story was actually really sweet, and come on, Leslie's basically
it was an excuse for you to go into the fucking sewers again and waste time, though.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree. Plus, well, to be fair, we did get more Corneo, and in the original, we didn't see much of him. Like,
because it's not that important to the plot.
But he was important to the plot at some point, and then he gets away, and you don't really know much about where he goes. And now we get a little more of that. It's not much more. The only other time we see him in the original is on the Wutai side quest.
Yeah.
That's the only other time he shows up. So it was kind of cool to see more of him, and I actually did really like Leslie's plot, because it also really helped to show how disgusting of a person Corneo was.
I guess my thoughts on that, and I share the same thoughts about like there being more Johnny. I don't fucking care about Johnny. Like he was in 7 as much as he needs to be. Like, and new characters like Roach. Like, what?
Yeah,
what the fuck
he
like
was one of the most wasted characters.
Wasn't even a character. He was just like a fucking Nomura drawing, and he wanted to have it in a game.
What was that,
Yeah.
Delilah?
He was was a mini game.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I wish we got more of him if they were gonna, because they had some hype around him, like, oh yeah, look, it's another member of Soldier, something we don't really see much of, and he's eccentric and is like an actual character with a name and a personality, and I thought we were gonna see a lot more of him. I thought he was gonna be more goes back to what I was saying, like,
Again, if it played into
if it
you
played
introduce Rufus earlier and then have
Oh, okay.
Rufus maybe employing Roach to try to take out you know what I'm saying? Like then you can build on
So
what you're building on.
I don't know if I like that whole subplot that you're making up here, but I do think that
It's just just coming out of my head. I mean,
I know.
obviously I'm not a professional game writer. I'm just saying like there's so much wasted potential and I see it substituted for like something like everybody seems to think like chapter 9 was the best chapter in the game, and I'm like, Wall Market and Corneo was like a little thing in the original. It didn't take that long, and it was like a little aside to the plot, and
I
and it was
really
it
I
was one of the biggest slogs for me in the game. I was like, when the fuck is this over? And I think a lot of people are just looking at it because, like, through a child's eyes, when we first played this, it was like, oh, this is so weird. Oh, we were cross-dressing, and there was like a rape dungeon. It was something never in a video game before. And I'm like, yeah, but like, it's not really like driving the plot at all.
I don't know. I think I don't know if Delaila. I think Delaila might agree, but hard disagree on that one. I really liked Chapter 9.
I like Chapter 9. It was the funnest chapter. I really like how they redesigned the Wall Market. And like instead of the honeybee being like all the way in the back of the Wall Market, it was like in this like underground nightlife scene. So I thought that was really cool. And just the fucking scene of Cloud and Andrea Rodea on stage was literally gold. Like it was the best scene I've seen in a video game in a long time.
Yeah, I really liked Wall Market. I really, really liked that chapter. The thing I didn't like about that chapter was the whole first half of it was still going through the collapsed expressway, and then
the fucking cranes.
Just from a pacing perspective, that kind of blew big time. But
the cranes were terrible.
Wall Market itself was just like that section in the original game. It's unique because it's this area where you know what your objective is, and you kind of have to figure out how you get the pieces to get through to that objective, and depending on how far you go with it, it might change the outcome. So it was really unique from that regard. You can either just go to the gym and get the wig, and then go to the dress shop and get the dress, and that's all you need. Or you could go to that dude at the materia shop or item shop, whatever it is, and help him out. Help him get the thing that's at the inn, in the vending machine. You could help him with that and get a tiara, and you could go to the Honeybee Inn and get underwear, and you can even go back to the Honeybee Inn when you're in your dress and get makeup. You could go get some sort of perfume by helping the person in the bathroom at the bar. There's just so much extra little things you can do there. And one of the an interesting way of going about it in this was a lot of that stuff was relegated to side quests, and they kind of made the main objective they tied the main objective into the plot and made it more narrative, I guess. They made it more of a narrative.
I will say this, and maybe my thoughts on Chapter 9 just has to do with how frustrated I was at that point in the game with the pacing of the game as a whole up to that point, because I was already at that point in the game getting really fucking frustrated with how many segments were like just one or two screens in the original and were padded out into.
But I don't understand why that bothered you.
We're gonna walk 5 feet, and then you're gonna see a little fucking blue triangle and have to squeeze through this to hide a loading screen so you can walk another 5 feet and walk through another blue triangle, and then we're gonna do some cranes, and then here's a trash mob, and you're gonna run through the subway that's unnecessarily fucking long just to pad out and make the game 30 hours so people don't complain that it was a waste of money. Like looking back, like there was so much time that was just fucking unnecessary.
Contrast to
I
that, though, it feels more like a city.
I don't care though because Midgar was the least interesting part of the original.
Go ahead, Delilah. What were you gonna say?
Yeah,
No, I was gonna say I agree on some of the padding issues that it didn't really strike me until I played a second time around on hard mode. Like you said, the squeezing through whatever spaces took way too long. Climbing however many fucking ladders, then you make a right, you gotta climb another ladder. And some of the areas like didn't need to be that big. I agree
So
with you 100%. But I think the reason why they did some of the padding, especially with making the areas bigger, is that there weren't as many random encounters when it came to enemies. So if you wanted to level up a little more, like that, like doing the side quests or like going back and forth between those areas was the best you can do to level up. I think that's the only reason why they did that, but some of it was kind of a slog.
I will say though, to going back to Wall Market, to the credit, I did enjoy the concept of the Coliseum. I thought that was a cool way of, you had to prove yourself in the Coliseum to get in. I didn't necessarily like, I wasn't into the new character. What was his name? Sam.
yeah,
Like,
Sam,
or
Madam
the
M, and
yeah,
Andrea.
they weren't like terribly intriguing to me, but like the concept of you're kind of they're using you in this Coliseum like to make money off of betting and whatnot. It was cool. I think it was cooler than just having you go there and have to randomly find items to get in.
Yeah, they integrated a lot of that stuff as like side content and made them like were able to make it serve the plot a lot better with
Yeah,
what they did with that entire section. To go back to what you were saying about squeezing through a gap and going slow through an area and all that nonsense. Not that I disagree with it all. It's just I feel like that's a bigger problem with more cinematic storytelling because that's a common thing in a
it's a technical thing
it's a lot of
to be
yeah
fair.
it's a technical thing in some regards and it's a narrative thing in a lot of in most regards I'd say because on a first playthrough I like it because it gives you a moment to take in the environment, take a
Hmm.
break, get some story beats, have conversations. It makes it feel more real. It makes it feel more organic because in the original like these characters don't just like have idle conversations because none of them are even present on the screen save for Cloud and you just
Right.
have a bunch of random encounters and you run from screen to screen going from place to place. None of those conversations really happen. This makes it more like these people are there. It makes it more interesting to hear what they have to say to one another and what they have to say about the things that are surrounding
I
them.
think I think what you're talking about more are like the slow walking sections where it
The
prohibits you
forced
from like
walking
running.
sections, yeah.
Yeah, those I didn't necessarily have a problem with. Like when you first go to like Aerith's house,
Hmm.
I thought that was like it was well done. Like you're going through that little tube
But that
of
still does go
fucking
along with what we're
wreckage.
talking about with just solely with the environments. You're going through the collapsed expressway. It's this entire expressway that's just destroyed because of past events and
Oh, with well,
you're squeezing under like broken rubble and
see,
climbing up and down ladders using these cranes and shit. And I
my
didn't
problem with that wasn't even just the squeezing through in the ladders. It's like, what the fuck is this ghost story? Why is it here? Where does it go?
Are
I
you talking about the train graveyard?
Yeah. Wait, are
Okay.
we talking about the same thing?
I was talking about the collapsed expressway. Train graveyard's a different place.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about the
But
train.
even
Right.
so, like
Sorry.
I don't know, that was always a weird to just talk about that real quick. That was always a weird location in the original of just like this train graveyard that no everyone's afraid to go to because they're supposedly ghosts. And all you do is run through the screens and fight the occasional enemies. This gave an actual plot to that location. It was
Yeah.
interesting. It gave you some backstory, some lore to this whole location that was present in the original, but you really didn't have any rhyme or reason to it. I really liked that. I really liked getting some background story and even like a small little narrative beat to that area. And all the while, like, Tifa's also anxious because she heard that there's apparently this plot to drop the plate. She doesn't know if it's for real or not, but if it is real, like, she needs to get there quick.
But again, that goes back to like I get what you're saying about the lore and like adding, but it's adding at the expense of the actual bigger plot and story that's going on. Because when you start the train graveyard, Tifa's like, "Fuck, we gotta go," because she sees the battle going on in the
Right, but you're
background
also
at the tower.
you're also
But
coming
hold on,
across. Okay.
but hold on one second. And then as you're going through the thing, all of a sudden she's like a scared little waifu, like running up to you and grabbing your arm. And it's like, what the fuck? Like 2 seconds ago, you're like, fuck, we gotta go. And now there's this whole ghost
Dude,
thing.
you can want to stop. You can want to stop an evil corporation from dropping a big ass bunch of
But
shit on your
what
people,
I'm talking about
and
is,
still be afraid of ghosts, Jason.
no, yes, I agree. But what I'm talking about is just the pacing of the story. It's like when you get to the beginning of that chapter, you see the battle going on. It's like, oh shit, we're going to the battle. Let's go. And then all of a sudden, like,
You don't see the
what?
battle going on. You just see a
Yeah,
helicopter, maybe.
you can no, you see the explosions on the
Oh.
on the tower.
Okay. I didn't think it was that bad, personally. I want to get back to the point that I was trying to make because I never finished it.
Okay.
Because yeah, well, I'm talking about the Collapse Expressway, talking about the forced walking sections. I think those things are great on a first playthrough. As Delaila was saying, we both went through on hard mode, or we're currently going through on hard mode, and those are the worst sections now because we already know what happens. We've already seen the conversations or heard the conversations. We've already seen the environments. We just want to go. We want to get onto the fights that we need to fight to progress, and we want to move on to the next chapter. And having those sections in a game like this are really, really frustrating for that reason, because they take time. And especially with, like, those crane puzzles, like, they were nice. I didn't mind them originally. On a second playthrough, they're a fucking chore.
Yeah.
They're not they weren't complicated to begin with, but they were still something you had to figure out. You don't have to figure them out anymore. And now it's just like, ugh, I got to do this. All right, let's see how fast I can do it. At least the game showed mercy and let you skip the bike mini games on repeat playthroughs. Thank God for that.
Even that was funner than the cranes.
The camera, like, I remember that last boss you fight in the second bike section. And like, because the camera swings when you're on the flank of the robot, it's hard to tell which way you're supposed to be pushing the analog stick to get closer to it and like get out of range of its attacks. And I was just like, what the fuck is going on? It was one of the few times I died. Yeah.
You know what though? That fight was cool. Like, that's a change that I really was happy with. That, like, you didn't fight Motorball at the end of the highway off your bike. Like, no, he's this big robot that's like zooming after you. Absolutely, you fight him on the bike. Like, why wouldn't you? That's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Like, that was so cool. All right. I'm. What else can we be contentious about?
I'm sorry.
Let's go on to other. Actually, let's go on to other things that we should really talk about. Well, we're on the topic of. We're dancing around this topic, so let's talk about it. The side content, the side quests, and how that affects the pacing.
Yeah, I started realizing about halfway through the game that I was only doing them for the rewards because you get like certain materia and whatnot,
they also
and
do
equipment that you can't get elsewhere.
Some of them do affect later things. Mostly, just
Dresses.
chapters. Yeah, chapters 3, 8, and 9.
And there's also if you do, you get the summons, but also there's a story beat that you won't get otherwise regarding what's his name, Chadley.
Yes.
Like, you find out who Chadley is. Spoiler alert.
I saw that today, since I beat the VR missions. That was a big surprise.
Aside from the Chadley stuff, which I thought was also a cool way of integrating progression just naturally into combat, I started realizing, at least for me, I felt the side quests, I was kind of wasting time. So I stopped doing them because none of them were none of them had an interesting story. Like, I knew
most
from
of
the
them
first,
didn't.
I knew from the beginning, the first one, the like savior of the slums or whatever. I knew it was the old woman. Angel of the Sunlight. Yeah,
See,
I knew it was
I
something like
didn't
that.
know that, but it wasn't really a surprise when you find out. And I thought that was probably the only quest line that was actually interesting.
Yeah.
There's like that's a multi-part quest line that actually led somewhere and was interesting and introduced a lot of the newer, more interesting characters. Um, a lot of the other ones though, like, oh, the kids are late for class, go get them, and you have to
Yeah,
run around town
right.
finding these kids, talking to them, and they're like, oh shoot, I'm late for class, and yeah, that mission sucked.
I
But
will say
there was
that.
also one where like a man wanted to go grieve his wife, and but the graveyard is overtaken by monsters, so you go and wipe them out, and he like couldn't, his knees were bad, so he like didn't want to walk there, and you give him the key to go give back to the kids, and he's like, I can't move, you know that. He's like, all right, I'll take it, but it's gonna cost you, and then he gets mad and goes and does it himself. Like there's fun little character moments that you get from a lot of the side quests, but overall the plots of the side quests aren't that interesting.
Yeah, I guess maybe just spoiled by like side quests. Like maybe you were doing something like The Witcher. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't. Not that JRPGs can't have side quests, but like JRPGs tend to have primary plots with more forward momentum.
Yeah.
Like, and they're not branching in the same way that Western RPGs usually are. So I guess it's just harder to do side quests that are really as interesting and feel like they're worth your time. I
Yeah.
don't.
I mean,
I don't disagree.
they're optional. You don't have to do them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it
but they definitely are, like you said. I think one of the reasons it took me so long to beat it was because in the beginning I was doing them all, not
Well,
necessarily
yeah.
because I was enjoying it. It was just because I wanted the items that you get from them.
For like some of the big side quest chapters, like chapter 3, chapter 8, 14 especially. 14 took me basically an entire day of playtime just because of all those side quests that you had.
mhm.
There's
Hmm.
nine side quests in chapter 14. It took me an entire day to plow through that chapter on my first playthrough because of all those side quests. Um
And that was the chapter where everything opened up. Like you're able to fast travel when you do the Chocobo side quest, you're able to get different fast travel points to travel in between each slum, which was pretty cool. I wonder if they're going to open up the game a lot more for the second version.
well, yeah, and we'll talk about that more at the end of the episode, but it's so short lived. You know, you have to do a side quest in that one chapter to unlock that. It's pretty limited because all you can really go through is spanning from the church through Sector 5 to Sector 6 Wall Market. And
Yeah.
And
that's
yeah,
it. That's basically 2 sectors worth of locations. That's all you have to fast travel to. Now, granted, that's all that was really available in the original too. I'm not saying there should have been more, but to unlock that so late in the game just for that single chapter to do the rest of the side content that you have in that chapter, and then you move on to the rest of the game.
and it's really only the fast travel is really only to facilitate completing side quests,
Yes, it really, yeah,
which
no,
is
completely, because there's a lot of side quests in that chapter. A lot of them are at Wall Market, and a lot of them are in Sector 5.
yeah.
So you kind of have to bounce between the two, and fast travel helped that immensely, I have to admit. But like even before you finish that quest, like fast traveling costs skill, and then once you finish it, it doesn't. Well, it's like, well, what was the point of giving me a cost to begin with? It only lasted all of 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
at most, I spent 900 gil.
Yeah, they shouldn't have charged you for it at all.
It was an odd choice. It's just an
Oh,
odd
one good
choice.
side quest was the gym ones where you're doing pull-ups and
Oh my god, that pissed me
squats.
off.
Yeah, how
So
long did the pull up one take you?
Honestly, it didn't take me that
Oh, it
long.
took me like an hour.
I loved the general gameplay of it. It was only really I didn't even bother beating whatever it was professional, the hardest difficulty of the
You
pull-ups,
mean Jules?
because because
That fucking bastard.
obviously it's not impossible to do it, but like I was actually just going through runs where I wouldn't do anything. I would just watch because he does it's like staggered the pattern, but it's anywhere between 42 and 44
Yeah.
pull-ups each time. And I was just realizing it might have just been because I was playing for so long that like I just didn't have like the mental like coordination to be able to keep up. But I was like, I can only get into like the late 30s at best. I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm just moving on. Like
Yeah.
I would have to like go to sleep and take a dedicated
No.
few hours to do it.
Like I said, it took me about an hour to beat him, and I did not move on until I did it.
Yeah.
Which was
Darts though. Darts was the best minigame.
Darts was
Yeah, it was fun.
Darts was I think
I was disappointed it wasn't like more widespread throughout the game.
yeah, you can pretty much only do it that moment in time, and that's it. That's the end. Delilah, was that your
Yeah.
favorite too?
I think I liked the bike mini game,
Okay.
but maybe it's because Jesse was like feeling up on me, and I thought that was funny.
Yeah, that was funny. To go back to why I loved Wall Market so much.
Oh no, yeah, that was the best
I
mini game.
loved
Oh, hands down.
the Honeybee Inn section
Yeah.
because it's so at odds with Cloud as a character and the game as a whole, and they changed it so drastically from the original, but made it like way less sleazy and just far more hilarious
Fun.
and entertaining and fun, like to the point where all the women that work at the Honeybee Inn seem to be happy to work there and don't
Yeah.
just like demean and hate everyone that comes into the establishment, because that's how they were in the original. They all just like hated everyone that walked through the door, and here they're like enthusiastic about what they do, and it was just it was an interesting dichotomy.
Yeah.
Did you guys peek
It
through the sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, it reminded me of old rhythm game called Bust a Groove when you were
Oh,
dancing on
yeah.
stage. I love that so much. So yeah, that was my favorite mini game.
I think that was my favorite too.
The only thing that annoyed me about the dancing minigame was because the way that the signals came up for what button you were supposed to press, sometimes it would like flow between the characters and behind
Yeah.
them.
I liked
So,
that,
like,
but I know exactly what you didn't like about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
And agree with it.
it was hard to keep track of what the fuck was going on.
Well,
Well, I
sometimes
just had a hard time because I just wanted to look at Cloud and Andrea, and then I had to look at these goddamn buttons to do the
Right.
mini game.
well, like I know what you're saying, because like sometimes as it would go through the characters, like the prompts would show up in a flash, and you might press it, but before the ring comes down into it,
Yeah.
and or you just like don't notice it in time or whatever. I that part was a little frustrating, but I thought it flowed really well and was integrated into the scene, so you could just kind of like watch it all go down and still participate.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's just so, it was such a strange section, and probably the best part about it is how into it Aerith is.
Yeah.
She's out in the
It's
audience,
like,
just
yeah,
like
Cloud, work it.
like she was just so entertained by it.
That
And,
made me like her even more. That whole chapter made me like her more than I did in the original.
mhm. Jason, you seem to not like it too much.
It's not that I didn't like it too much. I just was like, oh, this is this is kind of a fun scene.
Okay.
I guess I just don't get like people's like, oh yeah, like maybe it's just
A lot
I
of
don't
it
want
has
to,
to do.
I don't want to say with people like being nostalgic about it, because that's not necessarily a fair judgment, because like Delilah wouldn't be nostalgic about it, like because like we said, she's not as invested, but she had a lot of fun with it.
I know
But
for
I mean, more
me,
power to you if you had fun with it.
I know for me, a lot of it had to do with nostalgia. A lot of the parts of this game, where I had a big ass smile on my face, were because like, oh fuck, I remember that, and this is like such a cool way of going about doing it in
Yeah.
in a new era. Like even when you get to this was like probably the first moment where I like had a big ass smile on my face. when you get to Sector 7 in Chapter 3,
Hmm.
and as you're on your way to the slums to go to Seventh Heaven and meet Tifa, there's that guy that's taken down the poster, and he's like looking up at the support pillar and everything. And there's that's a character in the original game. There's a guy
Yeah.
that's just hanging out at the fence looking up at the support pillar, and he's just admiring
Yeah.
it. And they took that guy and gave him like more of a personality, and like had him like talking shit on Avalanche, and he's there, and he's a character. And that was just incredible to me. Was them taking these no name people, even like the Shinra middle manager on the fucking train, who just like said like all of 10 words to Barrett in the original, and it was just Barrett yelling at him. Like, he got an
Yeah, that
entire
made it.
scene
Yeah.
in this.
I think yeah, and I like like that particular scene more so what it did for Barrett than necessarily like the Shinra guy.
Mm-hmm.
Although I agree there were little things like the Shinra guards at the gates.
Yes.
One of them's the rookie, and
Oh,
you
I
keep
love that
walking back
guy.
up, and every time you walk back, the manager is like, "Harder,
Yeah.
be more violent."
Well, and even those two no name soldiers who were in the original, again, they were there too. Just
Yeah,
obviously didn't have as much personality as they do in this. But like after the plate falls and you're going back through Sector 7,
they have a
they're
scene. Yeah,
they're there in disbelief that just happened. And they
right.
actually, and they also, like, prior to the plate falling, that they actually wind up helping people escape
Hmm.
because Aerith and Wedge were like, come on, you have to like let these people go or else they're going to die.
Well, yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, in the beginning, the veteran is telling the rookie, like, no, don't do this, don't do
Yeah,
that, you do what I say. And at the end, the rookie's like, nah, fuck what you say, I'm gonna help these people.
exactly.
I
And
love that so
like the
much.
and
fact that
again,
these two no-name soldiers got an arc is just fucking awesome.
right, and again, I think that goes back to like the things I liked that they added and expanded on, like Avalanche, Shinra. I like how they added more nuance rather than like straight up, you know, class warfare. This is the poor, this is the rich. Like they expanded upon it. Like people working for Shinra aren't necessarily all greedy corporate assholes. The ways that they expanded upon Reeves, so it will make more sense when we learn about Kate Sith later on. And we see Kate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was a cameo I totally wasn't expecting. And I kind of wish we got something more of that, or at least something
yeah,
else later, because like it was just like Reeve witnessed it through Kate Sith, just like there for whatever reason, and I'm not sure what that was trying to accomplish other than here he is. Oh, it's him. Like,
yeah.
for the player, that doesn't. It was like a big surprise moment, but for the plot, it didn't really.
Yeah,
It
for a
never
new
really
player,
equated to much.
like a new player would be like, what the fuck? Why is there a cat? Like,
But I guess what I really want to get at least from a nostalgia perspective, is they took a lot of things that you just kind of see and don't think much of, and they kind of portray them as like you could imagine them as like a kid playing this
yeah.
game for the first time, and that's what I found so special about this game, like so
I think I
widely
had,
special.
yeah, I think overall, like I sound really negative and like I think the thing is like I loved the stuff they expanded on stuff that was for the most part. There's some things I didn't like, but by and large, like the stuff that was in the original that they expanded on and gave nuance and character to, I liked. It's just mostly new stuff that they added that I didn't like.
Yeah,
I just think they brought the original and made it alive. Like they really
yeah.
livened up all of the slums. They livened up all of the characters. They really made Midgar like extremely enjoyable to explore.
The city
Um,
feels lived in. It feels it's vibrant and bustling with life. You're walking through one of the things that I didn't realize was so cool until I saw it myself was Jason Schreier was tweeting about the two kids that were on top of the Sector 5 slums, like they were on top of like a roof
mhm.
in the Sector
Yeah,
5 slums dancing, and there's a little girl on the ground like shouting up at them, and like there's just so many small little things to find like that.
Or in the Wall Market where you go into like this back alley that's like super gritty and dangerous, and there's like people like throwing up in the back there or like doing really like shady things.
Yeah, like you think there's like drug deals or they're like gangs, and you go back there and they're just like, you really don't want to be back here, pal.
Yeah.
And it sucks because there's a treasure chest behind them, and you're like, I
Yeah.
want that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Although it should be noted, a little funny thing I found and started to notice, kind of like what happened in Final Fantasy 15. There's a lot of copy paste NPCs,
Yeah.
like literally, and sometimes they'll show up like yards away from each other.
I saw a screenshot of the same model of a woman in 3 different places in the same shot.
That's
Yeah.
so funny.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you can't expect them to have.
Yeah. It's just a funny little
It is.
little cost saving thing.
Yeah. I definitely did have nostalgia for this game. And I didn't realize that I would have nostalgia for it until I played the remake. And most of that was because of the music, which is probably the strongest part of this game.
Yeah.
Is how they like remixed everything, and or well, like when you're exploring a city, it's one song, and then you get into a battle and they add like a little bit of bass to it. I thought that was super crafty, and that's what made me like brought up all the nostalgic feelings the most. It wasn't so much like the story or the characters. It was mostly like looking at how the environments were recreated and how the music was remixed.
That hands
kind of
down
weird.
Was one of my favorite elements of this game. Go ahead, Jason.
All I was gonna say, like a lot of the remixes, I did really like. The only thing I found weird was that when it came to combat music, they seem to be reusing Those Who Fight over and over and over again. Whereas like I think they only use Those Who Fight more, like, or harder, whatever the boss track is called.
Fight On.
Fight On,
That's
that's
what it's
it.
called.
I only remember hearing that like once. I was wondering why we didn't get that one remixed more.
There's a couple times where you hear it, but they did lean into other tracks a lot for boss fights. Yeah.
Yeah, there's like 15 different versions of Those Who Fight in this game, which is not a bad thing.
You mean Let
It's
the
a great
Battles
track.
Begin, like the regular boss or the regular?
I might be, maybe I'm confusing it with a different Final Fantasy. I thought in
might
7
be.
it was Those Who Fight.
It's Let the Battles Begin, I believe it's Let the Battles Begin is the title of the fight music, and Fight On is the boss, the generic boss music.
Because I know the actual record you get in this game is called Let the Battles Begin, but I don't think that's what it was called on the original soundtrack. Oh, hold on.
Hold on. Hold on.
No, I'm on the Final Fantasy wiki. It's also known. So Let the Battles Begin, also known as Those Who Fight.
All right.
So it's both of them.
All right. So back to the situation here. Yeah, the soundtrack was excellent.
Yeah, and no problem saying that.
Got no problem saying that. Yeah. I also really loved the jukebox remixes, where most of them were just like jazzed up songs. I personally really loved that.
It was almost like Cowboy Bebop versions of Final Fantasy tracks.
Some of them were kind of hard to recognize. Like I saw the titles and I was listening like for the melody to kick in on a lot of them, and some of them just didn't come across as well as others, but it was still an excellent little addition to throw in there, kind of as a collectible, but also as just a neat thing.
Yeah.
To make the world feel more alive. We haven't talked to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say when you're passing by the guy listening to the boombox and it's Hip Hop Day Chocobo.
Oh my god.
Yes. I was
fun.
So into that track. I just stood there.
Dude, I feel like
me too. I was bopping my head.
Everyone is so into that track. I didn't care for it too much. That was probably the one I was like, eh.
Can you actually get that as a record? I don't think I got all the records.
Pretty much all of those any music you hear out in the world you can get as a jukebox track.
Yeah, because I know there's like a trophy for getting them all, and
Yeah.
at the end I thought I had them all. How many is it? 30 of them?
31.
Okay, that's the one I'm missing then, because I had 1 through 30, and I'm like, I thought I had them all.
We haven't really talked a lot about the combat. And I guess I kind of want to talk about that a little bit before we close it out. How did we adapt to this combat? I know we all played the demo prior to the game coming out, so we had some time to practice. But personally, when I jumped back into this game, I was terrible, and it took me a little while to get back in the groove and actually come to understand how this combat works.
Yeah.
The way I kind of see it is that it has a really low skill floor but a really high skill ceiling. Where if you really just want like easy mode and classic mode kind of help you with this, but if you really just want to smash buttons, you can get through the game. Probably you're just gonna have a hell of a time doing it. But if you really dig deep into the nuances of how the combat works, it's extremely rewarding and super fun.
Yeah, I don't recommend that anyone plays it on classic and easy, because you don't really need to use any spells or abilities much. And
You don't need to use spells on normal. I stopped using spells except for cure.
oh, really?
Yeah,
I use spells
it's
on normal.
one of my criticisms of the game is that as I went on, I really was into it and I was optimistic about, because I've always been skeptical of the whole moving to action hybrid thing,
I feel
because
like it's
my opinion has always been you either go the near Autonoma route and lean into the action, or you do an actual RPG, like you do a Persona 5, Final Fantasy X fast-paced turn-based system. Those are the ways to get the best outcomes in terms of a combat system, and this kind of confirmed it in many ways for me, because at the end of the day, what cripples this system? The system in theory is awesome. The problem is when you start introducing, like, okay, there's a cast time on this spell, but at any point an enemy can just randomly attack you. You'll lose your ATB and the MP you were going to use. So what the fuck? And when enemies are casting spells, you can't break them out of it. And spells don't end up doing that much more than just hitting square does.
you can
When you're
break them out of it. You just need to. It's all about using the right moves at the right time.
But there's no indication of like what those specific, because I specifically tried. So there was one enemy who was doing not a spell, just like a random attack, and I did focus thrust, which it's one of like Cloud's abilities, which broke him out of the move, because that's what it does. It like staggers them. But then I did the same thing to another enemy during the same time, and it didn't do anything. And then there are certain moves like dodge does nothing. Area of attack or area of effect attacks in this game. There's no for most of them, like especially the melee ones of like big bosses. There's no way to determine. It's not like say Dark Souls where like it's basically frame to sight, where you know when you roll and you dodge, if you're not getting hit by the character model, then you're fine. Here, like you could be yards away and still get hit by the AOE, even though you're outside of the range of the physical model representation. You can just all of a sudden get hit by shit that's behind you.
I
Your
will.
characters are brain dead. They don't do shit when you're not controlling them. There's no way to program them. No
Well,
like
yeah,
gambit
that's
system.
kind of a problem I have with I don't know. Personally, a lot of people that have take issue with the AI of the game kind of miss the point of the combat. And I was one of those people at first until I started like every time I use an ATB, I switch characters.
Yeah.
Like if you switch characters every 5 to 10 seconds, you will end fights like 10 times faster than you would if you only controlled one. Because you're constantly cycling through everyone's strengths, you're constantly using their abilities, you're constantly like doing the things actively that they all should be doing. And I think that's kind of the point a lot of people are missing. A lot of people are missing the point that you're not supposed to just play as one person and let AI take control of the rest. No, the AI will do stuff, but not nearly as much as if you take control of them. And that's what the game kind of very easily facilitated in its combat. it very easily like made it so all you have to do is press right on the D-pad and boom, you're Barret. And
Yeah,
then press
no,
it again and boom, you're Tifa.
Which
Almost
you have
instantaneously.
to do that on hard mode, or else you're not going to
Yes.
get through
I,
it.
Yes, you do.
I agree. I agree. That's the intent of the system. That's why they made all their special abilities. You can't like execute Overcharge or Tifa's special like Omni Strike or whatever. The ones that are tied to triangle.
Yeah.
You can't do those when you issue tactical commands. You're supposed to be switching over. I agree that that's definitely the intent of the design. But again, like the system overall, it definitely works best and shines in specific arenas, particularly boss arenas with actual mechanics. But when you're in an enclosed sewer where the camera's freaking the fuck out and there's a bunch of whatever they're called, the frogmen
Sahagins.
that like just are jumping around, there's sparks flying everywhere because it's Nomura and he needs sparks flying everywhere. And like
God.
you can't see what the fuck is going on and you just feel like you're not in control. Like that's
I don't know.
what
I
that's
do
what
not.
that's what frustrates me about a hybrid system.
I did not feel that way whatsoever. I will say though that the Sahagin were easily the worst enemies in the entire fucking game. They were so fucking
Oh.
frustrating to fight.
You
Yeah.
can't block their jump attacks.
You can.
Like
You
no,
absolutely can.
I was holding R and expecting to
I've-
parry under
I
the
did that chapter on hard. You can block those.
dude, I got knocked back every single time. That's another thing too is aerial recovery. When you get knocked up, there's no aerial recovery.
There is.
So dude, there's no aerial recovery
Not
in the
aerial
game.
recovery. Not aerial recovery, but you can bounce off of getting knocked back pretty easily if you time it right.
Okay, if you time it right, I suppose. I don't know.
Jason, believe it or not, if you learn the mechanics, the game is easier.
Dude, I know the mechanics, and I just stopped using them because it was easier just to hit square and use cure spells.
See, and then that's
At the end of the day,
Wow.
a lot of the difficulty is just high health pools on these enemies.
Yeah, I don't know how people got through at least the latter half of this game without using like assess and exploiting like spell weaknesses, and doing the Punisher parries, where you switch from operator Punisher mode to parry, especially the human enemies.
Yeah.
But I guess I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't understand how you got away with using square all the time in cure.
No, I did block. Like I was mostly no. What are you talking about? I did use block in like the Punisher mode. But what
But,
I'm
like,
saying
not
is like that's just a
using
Not
basic.
using
or-
spells, not you like using your materia to like hit weaknesses and stuff.
Or like when you're fighting
It's
no,
almost
human
like you.
enemies parrying.
It's almost like you intentionally made the game harder for yourself.
It wasn't harder. I just kept the characters at full health and the health bars went down. That's
Were
what
you
I'm saying.
using
I'm like,
cure like all the time?
yeah, mostly prayer actually. Like
Yeah,
I had prayer
Yeah.
is
like,
if you
leveled,
level
yeah.
up a prayer, it is OP as hell. That is such a good materia.
I mean, I think what it all boils down to is because they're trying to make an RPG system and more actiony and sparkly, even though it doesn't make sense because the old turn-based animations were pretty sparkly in and of themselves. I mean, they're trying to make a game marketed to an expanded audience, and a lot of today's audience doesn't have the attention span for a turn-based combat system.
It's not even that. I just
Uh,
don't. I see no reason to do turn-based.
You're not because you're in full control. You don't have enemies that you can't see off camera fucking come up behind you and hit you and
Again, though,
take
I
you
feel
out
like
the-
that's just you fighting with the controls.
Yeah, because they made the moronic decision to make lock on the R3 button, and when I'm trying to move the camera, I'm
Like
switching
it is
between
in a
targets.
lot of third-person action games.
Yeah, but when you lock on, you don't fucking switch targets when you move the R analog stick
Yes, you do.
because I mean, I don't play Kingdom Hearts. I know
No, that has nothing to do with
I
Kingdom
know
Hearts.
it does because
No, it doesn't.
because the guy who works on the Kingdom Hearts combat design worked on this one.
It didn't use the R3 stick in Kingdom Hearts. It never has.
Dude, I don't know. I'm just saying, like,
Well, that's why I'm telling you.
in Nier Automata, when you lock onto something, you can still use the R stick to move the
You
camera
still
around.
can. Oh, to move the camera around. Yeah, okay. That admittedly is kind of frustrating because instead of moving the camera in this game, it moves the target from enemy to enemy.
All I'm
And
trying to
that
say is
does get kind of annoying when all I want to do is move the camera and accidentally I change targets to a completely different enemy I didn't want to change targets to. That admittedly is kind of frustrating, and I get your point there.
yeah, all I'm saying is the only times I died in this game is when like I fucking got hit by something off screen when I'm in the middle of a cure attack, or like I never died because of mechanics or enemy difficulty or some of the ridiculously large health pools of normal enemies. Like it, I don't know. I was just kind of mad on the combat. It just seemed to reaffirm what I believed before, which is you either go all in on the action or you go on a more tactical turn-based system. There really isn't a middle ground that's gonna, please the wants of both crowds.
Yeah,
I don't
I
know.
actually thought this was the middle ground that pleased at least me.
Yeah,
But
I agree with that.
But I think it's because Delilah, you're more into like the action.
But I was playing this game, especially on hard mode, more like a turn-based game than I was an action game. Because like I'm just literally using the action button to build
Mhm.
my ATB bar, and the rest of it is me like figuring out what ability or what spell I want to use on what enemy or what part of the enemy.
This
Um,
is this is kind of one of those games. I feel this way about a lot of games. This kind of comes close to being one of them where hard mode is almost, in my opinion, the intended difficulty. Because it
yeah,
forces you to actually learn the mechanics of the game. Like I never really used. Cloud is my least favorite character to play as, because I didn't really care for Punisher mode. I didn't really care for learning the timing of parrying until I had to, which was what hard mode kind of forces you to do. You're playing as Cloud throughout the majority of the game. Like there's only brief moments in time where you don't play, and the majority of one chapter where you don't play as Cloud. So like I had no choice but to learn how he worked. And learning how he worked, like, it almost felt like that was how it kind of made me realize, like, this is how I should have been playing the game. And since it forced me to learn this, like, this is how this almost seems like this is how this game is meant to be played. Although the only thing that hard mode does that's kind of frustrating is it turns off items. Like, you can't use any items, which
yeah.
obviously isn't really an intended thing. But I'm talking about the difficulty, making you learn how these mechanics work, making you learn, like, how to interrupt and how to prevent being interrupted, biding your time and using skills at the right time, exploiting enemy weaknesses, assessing everything so you understand exactly how it ticks and how to stagger it. Like, that's how the game is intended to be played, and hard mode really, really fostered that in me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I did do that a lot in just normal playthrough, but I did have a lot of struggles where, like, yeah, like you were talking about, Jason, I would go to kick off a cure and something would just knock me off course and I'd fucking waste an ATB. A lot of that shit happened. A lot of those fights
And
I
what,
struggled with.
right. And
But
what frustrates me about that is that wasn't my fault. It was because I didn't know that there was like an enemy behind me preparing to attack or something, just because of the camera and the focus of it.
well, I
I
guess the
guess when it
difference
comes to
is I didn't have a lot of time. I didn't spend a lot of time fighting with the controls, I guess.
and it all comes down to this. I think the difference in perspective here between me and you guys, I want this to be an RPG. It's not. It's an action RPG.
That's still an
I don't.
RPG.
There shouldn't be in an RPG. You're not. The difficulty doesn't come from the mechanics. It comes from tactical decisions you make and the strategy behind those decisions based on how you've built your characters. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Well,
It's
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
but
but
I
I
two
don't know
don't
different.
that
know.
I
I
agree
feel
with
like
you.
It's two different design philosophies.
I don't
I
think I
feel
agree
like
with
in
that,
this
though.
game, like you had to be extremely tactical though. Like that's why I thought it was a good kind of marrying of like turn-based and action because you did have to be tactical. At least like Mark said on hard mode where like you really have to be.
But again,
Whereas
you guys keep talking about hard mode. It's like
I
well,
know
most
it's
most
because
people
on
never
most
normal
talk
people
about
mode,
are not
like
going to
I
touch it.
realized I
yeah.
needed to do that a little too late in the game. I was like, okay, halfway through the game, I was just like figuring shit out, and then once I finally figured it out, I was like, oh, this is how the game's intended to be
Yeah,
played. And
that's
and if you if you play on hard mode, like if they had that available from the beginning and people chose that, people would have had no choice but to learn those mechanics. Whereas on normal, you're kind of like fighting with the controls, like Mark keeps saying. But you do have to be extremely tactical with the combat, and that's what I like about it. Like it's not just spamming square and cure or potions or whatever.
Yeah.
At least that's not how it was in my experience.
By the way, I'm not saying it was difficult for me. Like, I died less than a handful of times. Like, it was just like monotonous.
All right.
That's really what I came to at the end. I didn't feel like I had control, so I was just slogging through it.
I feel like we're just gonna agree to disagree on this one, but
yeah,
I'm sure that
I think it's more a matter of opinion and what you wanted from the combat.
Well, a lot of it really harkens back to the last mainline entry of the series, Final Fantasy 15. That was also action RPG combat that had a lot of depth to it if you could take the time to learn it. But I also think that combat versus
I will say that this one was definitely better than 15.
This is much better because it's tighter. It gives you time to think, whereas 15 is much more dependent on you moving the stick and pressing the button at the same time, at the right time. And the biggest problem 15 had, in my opinion, was just overloading you with enemies to fight and never really giving you the chance to fight them because they're just on top of you at all times. And the easiest way to go about fighting them is to just either take out a greatsword and whack them all as much as you can at the same time, or use magic to just blow them all away, or use the magic ring that fucks everything up. Like, there's the best way to go about it is cheesing it. The best way to go about this combat is to strategize. It's to use everything at your disposal. If you lose, then go and reorganize your materia, or go upgrade your weapons a little bit, or change your weapon to have different abilities on it. You know, there is strategy to this combat, and it's still incredibly deep. It's still a good marriage, in my opinion, a good marriage of that full real-time combat and turn-based. Not being turn-based, but just having those abilities relegated to taking the time to fill up a bar. And they're not even like super special abilities. They're just like normal ass abilities.
Yeah, especially those blue materia, like the magnified materia, where you can link it to like a healing and heal your whole party, or like a fire and like cast fire on a bunch of enemies, or if you linked an elemental materia to an element, you can have your sword or whatever weapon you have that element. I love the shit out of all of that. And I didn't realize all that in the beginning of the game, so it took me a while to like really play with it. And once I played with the materia and the different tactical ways of approaching these enemies, the game really opened up for me in terms of combat, and I really like it.
I'm glad we talked about this at length, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that are going to come on both sides of this argument.
Of course.
I mean, yeah, for me, I relish any game that comes out nowadays with a turn-based, or at least a more tactical like approach, like something like Final Fantasy Tactics. Just because like people say, "Oh, it can't work." Well, Persona 5, like, come on.
Yeah.
It's elegant in its simplicity. I feel like this combat system here, it does have a lot of breadth. It just doesn't have the depth. Like, you do have a lot of options, but I didn't feel like there was enough worth for me to strategize. But again, I think here it's a matter of opinion and what you wanted out of the game.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I do want to move on to another topic, just because we are going pretty long on this one. I kind of want to talk about the enemies and the bosses a little bit, just because a small thing that I've really resonated with me. First of all, no enemies were left behind. Like, there's a lot of weird enemy designs in this game.
No, I'm just thinking of a sign: "No enemy left behind."
Like, there's a lot of weird enemy designs in this game, in the entire game, not even just within Midgar. Like as soon as you leave Midgar in the original, there's an enemy you can run into that's a fucking possessed motorbike.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what the fuck is that? But like, there's really weird ones inside of Midgar, and we're sitting here. I was sitting here thinking, leading up to this game, like, there's no way we're gonna run into random encounters against a fucking demonic house.
Yeah.
There's no way that's gonna happen, and it didn't. They made it a boss fight instead.
Yeah.
And
That was cool in the Coliseum. Yeah.
it was so cool. It was such a big surprise. A lot of this goes back to nostalgia, but it's just the fact that they took all these weird boss fights or these weird enemy designs and made them boss fights. The brain pods that you see in the latter half of the Shinra HQ, that was a mini boss fight. Like, that's a brain pod. The Swordipede, the fucking Swordipede. I totally forgot, and I even replayed the whole Midgar section like a week before the game came out. I forgot about Swordipedes. You fight a Swordipede as a boss.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, that was just so cool to get some of those weirder designs and make them bigger, grander, and still include them somehow. Even if they still don't make much sense. They didn't make sense before, they still don't make sense now.
The Swordipede was definitely one of the weaker bosses, I felt like, but
Yeah, but it was still the fact that
it was
there,
still cool. It was still cool that they included it, though. Yeah.
The fact that it was still there, the fact that it was still present in the game, they didn't cut it or anything. They didn't cut anything. Like, they only expanded on the bosses and the enemies, and made sure everything from before was included. I think there was only like one enemy that wasn't included that I noticed, and it was like this weird like slap board that you fight in Shinra HQ that occasionally popped up. Those showed up in no capacity in this game, but that's okay because like that would have been really weird to implement. But yeah, that's something I really appreciated about the enemies and the bosses in this game.
I felt like they had more enemies in this beginning section, but I could just not remember.
Yeah, it's such a small section, so like all those flying drakes were entirely new, or if they were in the original game, I think, but they show up way later, so they brought them into Midgar for this. Added new enemy types. There's not a lot of time for you to run into enemies in the original.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of getting, huh?
Oh, I was just gonna say they also bring in things through like the VR fights and whatnot.
They do the summons, fighting virtual summons to get the materia.
And like Hojo's lab, like you don't see them in the normal, but it's like the bomb and the Tomberry and whatnot.
Which was a cool way to get us to fight some of those classic enemies, and especially the summons. It was an interesting way for us to get summons. I do kind of wish more of them were found out in the world. Getting Chocobo and Moogle was a pretty interesting and cool method in the game, and I wish we got more of that. But it wasn't a deal breaker for me. Do we have anything else before I move on to the final two questions? Anything else that we want to talk about?
I think the only question I have for you guys is like, by the end of the game, I had like leveled up most of like this, the core materia. How do you think they're going to deal with that going forward? Like, and we have like summons already that you didn't even have at this point in the game.
So I guess that kind of deals or goes into my first final question. Yeah, like, where do they go from here? So we've already established that they don't, because of this whole breaking free of destiny thing, they don't really have to follow the plot as it was before. Do you think they will follow that plot? And yeah, how do we think things will carry over? The cap for this game is level 50. Jason, I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah, I know.
But like, I know like in the Dot Hack series, the games are split up into separate volumes, and if you the first one, level 50 was the cap, and if you moved that save into the second one when you got it, you'd start at that level and have all your stuff, and then the new cap would be 100. Do we think that could happen with this? Do we think they'll reset progression?
I heard a theory that that the way you meet Yuffie is she steals all your shit, all your materia, and that's how they just reset progress.
That's actually brilliant. I think
I know.
that's fantastic. Like, yeah, I guess here's like a tentative way that we could start off the next part is go to Calm, tutorialize the flashback as a way to get back into the combat and into the groove of the game, leave Calm and run into Yuffie way sooner and she steals all your shit. I think that's brilliant.
I feel like we're gonna have to get to like Wutai earlier, just because of how prevalent it is in this one.
It's 100% not going to be optional.
Yeah.
Especially with if they're gonna continue building on Wutai, on the Wutai Shinra War, it's gonna be integral to the plot,
Right.
which I look forward to.
So story wise, one of the big debates: will Aerith still die?
Mm.
I think you have to. Like, I don't think they're willing to fuck with that. But then again, given what they did here,
That's the thing, is they don't have to do any of the original game anymore. Like, if they really don't want to, they could completely, like, fuck it. You don't have to get a chocobo and get across the marsh anymore. You don't have to go through Mithril Mines. You don't have to go to Junin.
Right.
Fuck it. We'll
If
figure
these
something else out.
whispers keep saving her so that she can die in the moment that she's supposed to, like,
well,
maybe...
we killed
the Whispers are done. They're dead.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So
yeah, that's true.
Nothing.
And Sephiroth's plan could be completely different this time. Like,
Yeah.
They've really painted themselves into a corner, and I echo Delilah's enthusiasm about where they go from here. I do, but man, I like all bets are off. I have no fucking idea.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, I think I'm indifferent. I'm not like angry about it.
Yeah, that's
I'm just
where
like,
I'm at.
Like, it was weird because when they first announced this remake, I was like, God, they could have been spending this time on just making Final Fantasy 16. Like, and then as this drew closer and I played that demo, I kind of got almost like a optimistic pessimism about it. And now that I've actually played it, I'm back where I began. I'm like, man, they could have just spent this time making Final Fantasy 16.
Wow.
Well, we'll see. Which comes first? Actually, that's a good other question. Which comes first, Final Fantasy VII Part 2 or Final Fantasy 16?
Oh, this.
Yeah.
Because that's modern Square Enix, their entire business model is, and that goes way back. That's the whole reason there was a Final Fantasy X too. It's all about reutilizing assets, reutilizing things you already know that's popular to money machine. It's not.
Well, we did get Final Fantasy 11.
Yeah, but that was
around the time that you're thinking.
But that was already in production.
And we got we also got a
it?
Final Fantasy 12. Yes, it was. And then we also got Final Fantasy 12 only like 2 years later.
Yeah, but that was a Nivalis game though. It's still in that same universe.
Pronounce that again?
Evilis. Did I say Evilis? Sometimes I do that and I slip and say Evilis.
I'm pretty sure it's Evilis, dude.
Evilis. I don't know. Whatever.
All right.
I think they have to do 7. Have to.
I think so too. I think we can't. You can't keep us all waiting another 6-7 years.
Right. And I mean, I think it will actually be a shorter production period, given that they have an easier engine to work with. They have the fundamentals, I guess, built. It's really just making the assets and mapping out the story.
I hope they improve those textures.
Oh God.
Some of those skyboxes, especially like when you're overlooking the destruction of Sector 7 and what is it, Chapter 15?
Yeah.
Straight up, if you actually look at them up close, Like if you're far away, sitting far away, they look good. But if you look up close, they literally look like PS1
Well,
backgrounds.
you know, and that's
Yeah,
kind of a
some of the
thing because
textures are very PS1.
there's that bit in chapter 15 where you're like shimmying around something, and you get the camera kind of zooms out, and you can see a lot of the wreckage down below.
That's what I'm
And
talking about.
yeah,
Yes.
it does kind of look like a pre-rendered background, and me and my roommate was looking at it when I was playing it, and he's just like, "Is that like supposed to be like a callback to the pre-rendered backgrounds?" And I'm like, "I don't know, but it really looks like it." And I don't know if that was intentional or if that was just like, yeah, we really
Hey
can't
man,
render this very well.
hey man, some of those pre-rendered backgrounds, especially by the time, not so much in 7, but by the time you get to 9, like some of those pre-rendered backgrounds are just fucking gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, I have if it was supposed to be like, even if it wasn't, like, I still really enjoyed that as a thing. Like,
Yeah,
it still
yeah,
was like, yeah, don't forget your roots. That looks really
yeah.
cool.
If it saves you time on the technical side to do other shit and make more detail, go.
But
Oh,
that's not even what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like
yeah.
some of the close-ups on some of those flowers look very
Oh,
bad.
I didn't even get.
But all right, I have Delilah, do you have anything more to add, or should I go into my final question?
Go into your final question.
All right, my final question. The question I really want to know is, who is best girl?
Tifa.
Barrett.
Barrett. Tifa.
uh,
Um.
Aerith for me in this game. Well, maybe Jesse actually.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's between Jesse, Tifa, and Aerith, and I think I gotta go Tifa.
Tifa.
Yeah,
Yes.
I
I do love
mean,
Tifa.
in this game, in this remake, I was always Tifa, but in this remake, I liked Aerith a lot more.
Yeah.
But that's just because they got into her character more, and there was a lot more playful moments with her. Whereas with Tifa,
Mhm.
she's just hot.
Yeah, they did a great, I don't know, they did a great job of really making all the characters stand out really well and just making them super likable. Uh but there's like a million other things I feel like we could talk about, but we gotta
I will
wrap.
Yeah.
say, I will say, for those of you who are Tifa fans, choose when she asks how should I dress, exotic all the way.
No,
Yes.
I'd say sporty.
I
No,
like
no,
the
no, no.
sporty
The
dress.
sporty dress was way better. The
Well,
exotic
actually,
one I didn't care for.
the sporty and the exotic kind of look similar in some ways.
No.
Yeah, 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 the sport.
No, they do
I mean,
not.
They're both like very Japanese styled.
yeah,
The one is
yeah,
like a kimono, the other one is like a club dress.
yeah, but they both have some whatever. Just don't choose mature. Mature looks.
No, because if you choose mature, you get that tasteful side boob.
All right.
All right, yeah, like I said, there's a million other things I feel like we could talk about, but
Aerith's red dress is still the best out of all
oh
six
yeah,
of the dresses.
her red dresses was phenomenal, and the scene they used for that was just like amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Okay, we gotta wrap. We've
Yeah.
been talking a while. Thank you for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed the game. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Delilah,
What's our next game?
hold on, we'll get there. We'll get there.
Oh,
Don't jump ahead.
sorry.
All right, that's
I thought
at
you
the
were gonna
very end.
forget.
No, I wasn't gonna forget. I would never forget. Come on, I wouldn't. You know what? I definitely wouldn't forget. Letting you plug your shit. What do you got? What are you doing?
You don't have to do that, but thank you.
Of course I do.
Yes,
Um,
we absolutely
You're
do.
the only interesting one out of the three of
Exactly.
us.
We're just fucking nerds who like Final Fantasy. You play all the cool shit that the new kids like.
I mean, right now I'm just playing Final Fantasy on hard mode. I'm doing a full playthrough of that on my YouTube channel, Assassina-san. I just released chapter 4, I think, and I'll have one releasing every day at 10 a.m. Eastern time.
Damn.
Yeah, because I'm on Hell House, so chapter 9. I should be wrapping that up by tomorrow morning, and then yeah, so I'll have one every day for my hard playthrough. And after that, I don't know. I'll probably be streaming our next game, which you'll announce in a bit.
Okay. Jason and I are totally uninteresting, and we have nothing to plug.
I will say, because I got to give this a rating like I do
Oh,
every
yes,
game.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
That is the one thing I do occasionally forget. What is the Kwasnicki rating of this game? Oh, man. Got to break this silence somehow.
6.75 pieces of materia out of 10 slots.
No.
Okay. Damn. How do you get
honestly,
3/4 of a materia?
I don't know.
Do you just like take a bite out of
Maybe
it?
maybe it's got 4 levels and you only level it up 3.
Okay. So we're going
Maybe.
6.75 mastered materia out of 10 slots. So
Sure.
one is only 3 out of 4 stars, but the rest are
Sure.
mastered. Got it. Okay. I'm glad we
Keep in mind, folks, that's still a good game. I actually used the entire spectrum.
Yeah. We know. All right. Jesus. Okay.
People freak out.
You could follow me on Twitter at what's my Twitter handle? Now at Nibelheimian. Oh, how fitting for this episode. Nibelheimian. That is indeed a Final Fantasy VII reference. You can follow Delaila on Twitter at Assassina_san. You can follow Jason on Twitter at SolidQuas, but don't
do
follow
that.
him. Don't do that. Don't follow him.
Thank God. I'm like the Colin of this group. Thank God I'm not on Twitter.
If you enjoyed this episode, if you listened to it on YouTube, please give it a like, subscribe to us, comment on the episode, tell us what you like, tell us what you didn't like, tell us what you want to hear, tell us what you want us to do going forward. If you listen to it on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review, 5 stars preferred. It would be fantastic. Share the show with your kids, your family, your pets, your brothers, your sisters, your friends, your coworkers. Everybody's in quarantine right now. They could definitely use some new listening material while they shirk responsibilities and play video games. And in about a month, you'll be getting to hear the next episode of this wonderful internet program where we will be covering. Delilah, you wanna let us know?
Yakuza Kiwami.
Yeah, we're going to be playing Yakuza Kiwami, the remake of the first Yakuza game. You can get it on PS4. I think it's on PC too. I can't remember. And it's on Xbox Game Pass as of I don't know, yesterday? Yeah. So if you have an Xbox One and Game Pass, you can play it for free.
And it was once free on the PlayStation
Yes.
Plus, so you might have it already.
Yeah, you might already have it if you're a PlayStation Plus subscriber and were so in the month of January or something.
Yeah.
So, hope to talk to you guys again in a month. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.